last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As always, it's a pleasure you're here with us. Tonight we have a new edition of Dark Matters Radio, of course. And tonight, we are genuinely going to be exploring some very dark matters in America's past, going back at least 50, almost 60 years. We're going to be taking a look at the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And another dark matter we're going to be exploring tonight is the September 11th, 2001 attack in New York City and in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. My guest tonight is Popeye, host of Down the Rabbit Hole, right here on KGRA-DB. And just to give you a little heads up, tonight, Mark Center will not be joining us. Mark had some kind of catastrophic event with his computer. He called me up about 2 p.m. to let me know. However, Mr. Gary Cassell is here. And Chanel, if you would please bring those gentlemen all on. There he is. Gary, welcome back, my friend. And
always
Popeye,
good to be here, my friend.
Popeye, it's great to have you join us here right on Dark Matters Radio.
Thanks for having me on tonight, Don. I appreciate it.
No problem. Now, for all you folks that may be wondering why you don't have a visage of Popeye, well, actually, there are two reasons. Number one, he's redoing his radio studio. He doesn't have his camera set up. And number two, I understand he's going out after the show, so he got himself all painted up, his hair done and everything, and he doesn't want to surprise anybody. So what color lipstick are you running there, Popeye?
I was going to use maybe a nice shade of fuchsia, perhaps maybe bright orange. I don't know.
Your eyes made up too?
Yep, I look just like that dude that worked for the Biden administration that ran the nuke waste disposal.
Absolutely outstanding.
The one that stole all the dresses, that guy.
Yeah, and the underwear, yeah.
Yep.
My hero.
Oh, God. Well, you know, I talked to Popeye. I had been a guest on Popeye's show some time ago.
It's an awesome show, by the way.
Well, thank you. And we had talked a lot about, at that point, the Kennedy assassination and a chunk of disinformation like you would not believe, which I'm sure we're going to hit on tonight, dealing with a extremely discredited theory that during the Dallas motorcade, the Secret Service driver was actually the guy that fired the fatal headshot into President Kennedy. Well, let me tell you, that's total bogus and bullshit, and I'll tell you all about it. I basically was at UFO Magazine, we were in the middle of all of that stuff as it happened. It's really it's a pathetic story, but I'm sure you'll hear about it tonight. But anyway, before we get going, Gary, did you have anything you wanted to hit before we get rolling?
Well, at times like this, I like to hit that pause button and take a look back at how I look at people when they say crazy shit like that. Here's the look. Are you ready? No. I've had people walk up and say shit like that to me, It was the driver, or he was assassinated by the Secret Service. I'm like, come on, dude. Fuck off, man. Really, fuck off.
Yeah,
Popeye, it's nice
yeah.
to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too, man.
How's that spinach thing going?
Oh, it's going well.
Is it your blue pill?
Well, no, I would never take the blue pill. I could
Just
never be
spinach.
like Cypher and go back into the Matrix. Although I could understand there have been times where it's just like I get it. I get why he did it. I wouldn't do it myself, but I understand it.
You know what? I'm going back into the pod and putting the thing in my neck. I'm done with this bullshit.
Seriously, sometimes, when you look at humanity, as a whole, sometimes you just shake your head and face palm it. You're like, I get why they think we're idiots. I understand it.
I do it every day because I was on Latino Slant about an hour ago. And one of the things that got brought up was because we talked about the show Shogun, my book, Vindicated, but then we got into it about the Secret World of Magical Negroes, I think is the name of the movie. And they wanted to know if I saw it, and I went, no. Why would I want to watch a movie that's that absurdly racist? No. And that's the world we live in. People
right, and
finance that kind of movie.
Right, and it's not like something where, like, it's not like Mel Brooks, where they made fun of racism, and that was how they actually dealt with like those type of topics.
And
30 years
the
ago.
most racist comical moments in that film were written by black comedians.
Yes.
Richard Pryor, Dick Gregory were two of the writers.
Yep. And because if you they understood that if you wanted to combat something like racism, then you have to, you don't stifle the people's speech on it. You allow the morons to speak, and then you make absurd fun of
Tell
it
them how
and
they
point
look.
out how stupid it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like holding up a mirror to somebody and letting them see themselves. That's how you handle it. Nowadays, you get canceled, you breathe in the wrong direction. YouTube will throw you off. You'll get thrown off Facebook. Don, I don't know how you, as politically incorrect as you are, my brother, have been able to just make it. You sail like a ship, just right through the water.
Well, look, guys, I got to tell you, this whole gestalt of racism. I grew up. I was born in the 50s. I grew up in the 60s. And I was in high school when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. The night of my high school prom, my senior prom, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Now, we're talking about 1968. That was an absolutely, oh God, that year was horrible. Of course, Vietnam was at its height. All right. I was getting ready. I went to college for a year, and then I said, screw this. I went into the Army. Okay. I thought my parents were going to go apoplectic, but I had to do something else. Now, as time went by, relations between the various, and of course, in the Army, in Vietnam, I wasn't back in the rear with the gear. I was out there literally on the very tip of the spear. And out there, you don't have time for that kind of nonsense. And believe me, It was nonsense. I ended up bleeding, and my God, it was red. And I had black buddies that ended up bleeding. My God, it was red. And everybody was wearing green, okay? There were no differences. Now, back in the States, okay, as time went on, things seemed to get much, much better. And I'm going to be politically incorrect right now
No way.
because it wasn't until President Obama took office that he began making waves about racism and problems that he perceived between whites and blacks.
Bingo.
And I got to tell you, it reverberated for years. It's happening right now.
They
I
couldn't
see
use
these.
racism in politics, Don, until they had the first black president. Before that, it was all old, rich white dudes. So you couldn't, you could say they were racist, but you couldn't use that excuse to politically divide people. And as soon as they put Obama in, he wasn't even in the office, and they started with that crap. Oh, racists hate him. It's because he's black. And you're right. That's where they started this new, fresh push for racism and dividing everybody, using that as a tool. You are 100%
I didn't.
correct.
I got to tell you, I didn't like Obama. I didn't like him even a little bit, but it had nothing to do with his race.
That's because he was
It
a
had
commie.
to do with his goddamn politics.
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't give a tinker's damn for the military. Okay. They would light up the White House in the Gay Keller scheme, all right, at night, but we had GIs dying in the field, and they barely ever acknowledged them. Now, hey, that's something, and I don't care who you are. You ever put that crap in front of me, you're going to have a hell of an argument, because any man or woman that puts on a uniform to go into harm's way for this country, and I got to tell you, for the last 3-4 years, it's been mostly crap. Okay, for anybody that's died or have been injured in service, we have an administration right now that doesn't give a tinker's damn or a shit for the military. And hey, that's my hot point. That's my sore point. That's where my button gets pushed.
And Don, that is a major point in my book, the graphic novel Vindicated Inc. It deals with a disabled veteran dealing with the VA. I mean, it's not the story, but it's in there because it's important and it's problematic today. One of the worst things you deal with as a veteran today, in particular, if you're disabled, is the med board process if you're trying to still be active duty. Because it's a showstopper.
Let me tell you, when as I got older, okay, the wounds that I received in service, in combat, became worse. Okay, that's just a nature. That's a natural thing. As you get older, stuff that you could do when you were 35 or 40, pretty damn hard to do at my age.
And they left some of the metal in you, didn't they?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And
that's always going to be problematic.
I still have shrapnel in me, yeah. But hey, it is what it is. I don't, as a rule, I don't whine about it. Hey, it's what happened. I asked for it. I volunteered. I enlisted in the Army.
You volunteered, but you didn't ask to have shit put in you.
Well, that's true. That's true.
No,
I volunteered for Vietnam, and of course, you always think at that age when you're 20, 21, you're immortal. Okay, nothing can happen to me until you get in the shit, and then you find out that's not the case.
That's because the system wasn't set up to take care of us, Don. The system was set up. The the care for veterans and the VA has always been an afterthought. They invaded Iraq. They didn't even think about what they were going to do when they overthrow Saddam. They just get in there and get her done. But what are we going to do afterwards?
George Bush was a Jesus, what a dumb bastard.
Well,
Not only
he was not conservative by any measure.
Well,
no,
him, Wolfowitz,
what
all
they
of them.
did. Look, I was on operations in Vietnam, and when you go in to clean out bad guys and pick up their stuff, we were involved in intelligence things. You got to have a plan on what to do with the stuff you pick up, you grab. Okay. In Iraq, they would overrun entire units. Everybody would throw their guns down and take off. Their explosives, their RPGs, their mines, and just leave it sit there. And we bypassed it. We didn't do anything with it. And later, when the guerrilla movement got going, they had arms and ammunition all over the damn country. I mean,
well, it's the same reason. It's the same thing that they did to you guys in Vietnam with the rules of engagement, where they would constantly change the rules of engagement and make them retarded things like American aircraft couldn't engage SAM missile, like a SAM missile battery, until it was actively tracking them. Well,
yeah,
by then,
you're talking about just the rules of engagement, though, Popeye, because they're all insane.
Yeah, just the rules of engagement themselves are wars used to be when they were fought, they were meant to be won. Now they're meant to be sustained for a multitude of reasons, whether it's the military-industrial complex.
It's a fear of the media too that plays a big part in that, Popeye.
Well,
the military is afraid of the media.
Well, because the media is another branch of the government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no, I disagree. I disagree.
Look at what they're doing with the Democrats.
It's not a branch of the government. It's a branch
of the Democratic Party.
National Party.
There you go.
Well, yeah, and then an offshoot of the government. But people in the government that are Democrats, will say,
are using it. No, I get what you're saying, Popeye.
But it's not just. See, there's more to it. This would blow you guys away to find out. I don't know if you guys know this, but you guys have heard of Operation Mockingbird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. So the CIA back in like the 50s figured out how they can control the media. So now, this very day, they're in big newsrooms like CNN. There is at least one individual who is trained, and they're not working for CNN. It's a cover, but they are trained in psychological operations. And that's what the news has become. That's why you can see, look how easy and fast they formed the Summer of Love and the BLM riots, and all of that came out because the media formulated an argument. They formulated what happened. They put it together. That was not generic. That wasn't people getting pissed off. Yeah, there were some people that were getting dragged into it, that there was a lot of genuine anger, but they fomented that. The media knew what they were doing, and they were doing it at the behest of their masters. It's not even a left or a right thing, because they try to make it about that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen
it's a progressive socialist thing.
Have you ever seen I have a logo, and it's a shadowy Uncle Sam character with an all-seeing eye in his hat, and he's got a Democrat puppet, a Republican puppet, and they both have hypnotizing eyes. And we made this thing like a long, long time ago as our logo, like almost 20 years ago, and it still holds true to this day. They use that to mesmerize people and get people to argue while they're working behind the scenes on their agenda. And their agenda is total control. The COVID thing, I call it the arm dart fiasco to get past any censorship. That whole thing, okay, if that exposed what their view of the general public, the general populace is, and how they want to control them. Look at the stuff that they wanted to do. They were talking about putting people in camps that didn't, and they were openly talking about this on the mainstream. You don't want to get the arm dart, into a camp you go. And it's amazing how many people in this country were willing to go right along with that because they were scared. So the media, yes, definitely, they use media manipulation as a huge tactic. That's how they got away with JFK's murder. That's how they got away with 9/11. I mean, it wasn't 2 hours into 9/11 and they knew Osama bin Laden did it. Really? 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 How many things have they not solved, and yet they knew within 2 hours who did it, where he was, how he did it, his whole connection, all the guys, they had the names of the hijackers? How is that possible? How in the world is that possible unless they already knew it? There's a lot of shady stuff that happened with 9/11, but my point is they use the media to set the narrative. Being a firefighter in New Jersey on that day, I witnessed many things, and I saw the narrative get twisted and changed. And it's just crazy uh, how easily the media can do that and how fast the people will, buy it. And Don, you and I were talking yesterday. I mentioned the show I'm doing on Saturday. I brought up a guy named Yuri Bezmenov. And the reason I bring him up right now is I don't know if I know you hadn't heard of him yet, and I don't know if the listeners have ever heard of him. Jerry, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Um, I don't know if even most of the people, other hosts on KJRA have ever heard of him, but he's an important figure. He was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin 40 years ago. He's a former KGB subversive, and his job was to go in, and part of his job was his cover was that of a journalist, but he was a subversive. So you go in and they do subversive things to overthrow the governments. This is what the Marxists used to do, the Soviets. Okay. And he explains how they use what's called ideological subversion to overthrow governments and bring about whatever change that they're attempting to do. Now, when you guys hear Marxist or communist, I want you to think of the word illuminist, like Illuminati. They are real. Okay. Adam Weishaupt used to have the nickname Spartacus. 1776. That's why that's actually on the dollar bill. It's not our revolution. That's why it's on the bottom of a pyramid that says Annuit Coeptis Novus Ordo Seclorum. It means our enterprise is a success, this new world order. That's what it means in Latin. The 1776 represents the Bavarian Illuminati, founded by Weishaupt. They eventually, the government of Bavaria figured out what their plans were, and they had to go underground. And that's when they hid themselves inside of the Order of Freemasonry. So Freemasonry has two different degrees. There's the blue degrees and the inner degrees. The blue degrees are the guys that most people know that are in the Masons. They don't really know what the inside rings are doing. They're the ones that go out and raise the money for sick kids and do all the charitable stuff. Those are the good people that join the Masons organization thinking it's a good organization. And then there's the inner degrees. Those are the ones that are people like they get up to 33rd degree Freemason. Those are people like politicians. The average Joe doesn't get there. They only go to third degree. So, but they don't know what's going on at the tippy top. Anyway, it's just my point is the Illuminati hid inside of the Freemasonry. What better of a place for a secret society to hide than inside an already secret society? So they still exist to this day, and their order. And when you think communism or Marxism, think Illuminism, because the people that wrote the Communist Manifesto wasn't Karl Marx. It was a group of guys that called themselves the League of the Just. I couldn't make this up. I know it sounds corny as all get out, but that's what they call themselves. It always makes me think of that movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But they called themselves the League of the Just. And they got together, and these people, these were people like the shadowy elites that we have today that are involved in these secret societies. They
Where
got together.
were these guys? What country?
They were here, and they were. A lot of this was taking place here in the United States and in Europe. There were
Because I know
members
that there
of,
was a socialism that was brewing in the 1800s, which Charles Dickens was a part of. Because I think he was coming from a truly altruistic position, because he had hopes that it would be something better. But that's really he's one of the people I know that was involved in that movement. But I'm
right, and it
just
wouldn't be the
curious.
first time. It wouldn't be the first time that something like that got hijacked, like a good intended movement or purpose got
Yeah, there's a
hijacked.
lot of people on the left that I believe have the best of intentions.
Yes, they
Still going to
actually
hell,
want.
but you know.
Right. No, there are. I agree. I don't think everybody that's a Democrat is evil. The people
No,
that just go willingly party,
good
along
people.
party lines, but there are good people that generally just want better for society. And that's the point. They keep everybody at each other's throats. And while everyone's arguing over nuanced, stupid things, or they may not be stupid things, but they're nuanced arguments and people aren't paying attention to the bigger picture. And they don't understand that they're being made to argue with each other. So, yes, the socialism, the idea might have, there might have been certain people or groups that were pushing the ideal, like utopian, real, like good version of what socialism could be, right? If it wasn't being manipulated and twisted. But they took Weishaupt's writings from around 1776 and they rewrote them and they called it the Communist Manifesto and they slapped Marx's name on it. He was a front man.
Well,
And
gentlemen, I got to break in here because there's something that figures into all of this that has me damn near terrified because nobody in the media, which it's not the media, 25 years ago when I was doing my original radio show, UFOs Tonight, on the cable radio network for about 3 years, I had a co-host, Dwight Schultz. He played the crazy helicopter pilot on the A-Team. Okay, Howling Mad Murdoch.
Howling Mad
Later,
Murdoch. Yeah.
later he was Lieutenant Barclay on Star Trek: The Next Generation, etc. And he then said, and he said this on the show many times. He said, "It's not the news, it's the views." And I looked at him and I said, "What exactly do you mean?" He said, "It's all opinion pieces. They're not giving anybody the straight news anymore. It's all opinion pieces. They're pushing their agenda." And hey, that guy could not have been more right. But to get back to my original point, in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was 12 years old. I was in junior high school at the time, 8th grade. And I got to tell you, you guys are too young. You didn't go through that.
Yeah, I was a twinkle in my dad's eye at that time.
We
me as well.
totally expected nuclear war was going to break out. Okay. My old man, okay, was a lifer, Army. All right. He was packing up. They were going to ship him down to Florida. Now, what the hell would he be going down to Florida for? Well, how far is Cuba from Florida? They had plans for a massive invasion. The U.S.
Yep.
Navy had that whole area staked out with submarines, all kinds of stuff. Russian ships were approaching Cuba. Okay. They already set nuclear weapons up down there. We had an SR 71, or no, I take it back. It was a U-2. They were sending reconnaissance flights over there. The Cubans shot down a U-2 aircraft. The pilot was killed. You have no idea the tension, the anxiety, if nuclear war would have broken out, well, gang, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
No, that's why they blew
Okay.
Kennedy's head off, or one of the reasons, because he wouldn't go through with that invasion, Don.
Right. Well,
It
now
was,
we're
yeah,
sitting
it
here.
was revenge. It was revenge.
Vladimir Putin has started waving his nuclear saber again. Or were you guys aware of that in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
He drug that out again. Who in the hell's talking about it? And what if he finally got fed up to his eyebrows? The Ukrainian have been hitting targets inside of Mother Russia. Okay. and he decided to drop a tactical nuke somewhere in the Ukraine. Well, if that were to happen, buddy, all the bets are off. And we got a guy right now supposedly leading the free world that's looking for his next ice cream cone.
He left it in Ukraine.
I'm nervous. I don't know about y'all, but I'm nervous.
They want World War III. They want a reason. They're willing
Who
to
wants it?
sacrifice the people that control Biden. He's a front man. I mean, obviously he poops his pants and he eats ice cream, and that's what he does all day long. You know, and it's not even the people. I mean, there are people directly in his administration that control him, but it's the money powers, the people that control the Federal Reserve, the banks, the only people that benefit from war. The military industrial complex does to a degree, but the people that benefit the most from wars all throughout history are the big banks. All wars are banker wars. No civilian really wants to go kill other people for no good reason. And most people I know that, come back. Don, you're a combat vet. I know a lot of combat vets. I know a lot of my friends that were in Iraq. They look back now and they're like, they see like all of this waste and all of this tyranny and empirical evidence that shows that we were all lied to for years about almost everything. I don't trust a single one of them, but I know that the politicians aren't in charge. The president's just a front man. Obama was just a front man. He got his marching orders from somebody. So was Bush, Clinton. They all are. They know that there's a higher power above them. That's, again, going back to when I brought up Weishaupt and the Illuminati.
Well, for just a
Those
second,
people are behind the scenes.
for just a second, let me veer down an alleyway in this town we're in right now. And that alleyway is involved with UAP disclosure. Okay? UAP disclosure, unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs. Now, since July of last year, July 26th, actually, that was on my birthday. So if you're thinking about buying me a new Porsche, now you know what to shoot for. Okay. The 26th of July, David Grush went before Congress and spilled the beans that he was told he could spill. Now, I've been involved in that morass for well over 30 years, UFOs. And I'm here to tell you, I never believed until, I got to say, I did have a little bit of a turnaround in 2017, but I never believed they'd release the real secret. Now, recently, a number of months ago, I wrote a paper on disclosure. And boy, I'll tell you what, Popeye, I did a deep, deep dive into that paper. And basically, I laid it out. Here it is. There is a core secret to whatever this thing is all about. And that core secret is surrounded by a special access program. That means if you ain't in with the in crowd, you ain't never going to know nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, no matter what your clearance is. If you're not in, you're not in.
You're not in. If you're not on the bigot list, what's called the bigot list, forget it. Now, with that being said, okay, recently, actually, two guys that are known for their disclosure activism. Stephen Bassett, all right, a number of months ago appeared on our show, UAP Crossfire, which airs on KGRA-DB on Thursday evenings. All right. He was a guest. And last week, Danny Sheehan was a guest. All right. Now, these guys have both been banging the disclosure drum. This is all part of the overall plan to keep us all at odds, divided, divisive. Doesn't matter what the topic is. This happens to be a hot topic right now. Believing that they can force the federal government, whatever agency is in control, the Pentagon, the DOD, who knows? Okay, I'm sure they have a big say in it. And the intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, NRO, you name it, DIA, all right. Although there was something that happened with the DIA about roughly 20, 21 years ago that proved that they're not in on it either. But hey, the bottom line is that even the president of the United States, not this one, okay, not the guy we've got now, but Obama, Bill Clinton, George Bush, probably, although his old man, H.W., probably did have a handle on it back in the 70s when he ran the CIA. Now, whether he told his son anything about it, God only knows. But these people have been, they're despicable in my book beyond belief. Now that's my rant. But now we can veer back out into this nuclear war thing. But I got to tell you guys, if you've been following events, it ain't looking good. Popeye?
No, I mean, it does kind of look scary, but I mean, I know that this is all, I mean, having studied all this stuff and seen all this crazy stuff that's going on over the years, like it's all part of their agenda. You bring up the DIA. You know who formed the DIA? John Kennedy. Kennedy formed it, and it was because he knew he couldn't trust the Central Intelligence Agency. McNamara, signed off on everything, and of course that was the president who told him to do everything. But the whole point of the DIA was because Kennedy knew he could not trust the CIA. He could not trust, and that's, remember, after the whole Bay of Pigs fiasco, and realizing that they had screwed him, he inherited that plan. There was Alan Dulles that caused the planes to not take off. Okay, he was supposed to be there, and the chain of command was Dulles made the phone call got sent to him. He said yes, and then the planes took off. He knew what time they had to take off by. Everything was already pre-planned.
You're talking about the bombing. You're talking about the planned bombing raid, right?
Yes, the plan when they sent in, they were all B-52 Liberators, and they had to get in there before the MiGs got off the ground and destroy all the MiGs, because if even one MiG got off the ground, those prop-driven aircraft would be just sitting ducks. And there happened to be two MiGs that they were off on a training mission, and they didn't know that they had left the night before, and they heard over the radio what was going on, and they came in, and those two MiGs are what wiped out all of those bombers and the air support. But they could have gotten them all had the planes flown when they were supposed to. And the person in charge was Dulles. He was the last line of, the phone call was supposed to be made to him. He says yes, and the planes fly. And he conveniently wasn't in his office that day. Now, interestingly enough, there's a connection between that and 9/11. On 9/11, before about a couple months before 9/11 happened, I think it was about 4 or 5 months before, not too long before 9/11, they changed the rules. The rules didn't say that if there was a hijacking and there needed to be a shoot down order, you had to call the Secretary of Defense. Obviously, whoever the presiding officer at like NORAD or whatever command center was overseeing this situation, they could make that decision. That's why they're generals, or if they were an admiral. That's the whole point. They have stars on their shoulder for a reason. They're in that position. They can make that decision. Shortly before 9/11, the Bush administration changed that rule. So the final phone call had to go to Donald Rumsfeld. Well, interestingly enough, on the morning of Donald Rumsfeld, or on the morning of 9/11, when Rumsfeld's phone was ringing for, hey, we need to get fighter jets in the air, He wasn't there. He wasn't there. Do you know where he was? He was running around on the south lawn of the Pentagon. He was running around picking up plane parts. There's video of him picking up like some debris from the ground and trying to help people out of the building. And people go, oh, look, it's the Secretary of Defense. Look how noble he is. That's not his job. His job is to be in the command center. Okay. His job is not to be out helping people. I don't care how altruistic he wants to be. That's not his job. That means he wasn't doing his job. And it took forever to get in contact with him. So it took forever to get the okay. There were fighter aircraft in the air too. There was a lot of chicanery going on with that. There were 3 different drills, we'll call them, and drills can go live. You guys know that from being in the military. Drills can go live in a heartbeat. And these 3 drills were simulating hijacked airplanes all over the Northeast defense perimeter. So all these planes that were in the air were chasing ghost fake planes in a drill. In fact, the morning of 9/11, one of the first recordings that comes up that you can, if you look it up, you can still find this probably on YouTube. The air traffic controllers, you hear them talking back and forth, and they're talking about a hijacked airplane, and they say, is this real world or is this exercise? Because they didn't know. Because conveniently, when all of these drills were going on, it was Operation Amalgam Virgo, Operation, there were 2 other ones too. I'll think of the names while we're chatting, but one of them was like Operation Amalgam Virgo. Interestingly enough, Virgo the Virgin, I believe that's also the sign that time of year in September. There's a lot of esoteric occult, stuff that goes on behind the scenes because these people believe in that kind of thing. So there was a lot going on, and there were 3 different drills. So all these fighter pilots that could have been responding to these hijackings were busy, and they were chasing ghost planes that didn't exist. And this has all come out like during the 9/11 commission hearings. A lot of this stuff just got left on the editing room floor. That book is a farce. The official version of events is a farce. If you have the 9/11 commission hearings, like the book that they put out, you could use it for kindling in your fireplace or toilet paper. If the grid goes down, it could be good for either one of those 2 things. Or if you want to read it to shred it apart, and take it apart piece by piece. Otherwise, it's just a garbage biased report. A lot of this stuff was kept out of there, but all of these drills are going on. So these pilots just so happen to be too busy to respond to these hijackings until it's too late, until they can't really get there. And that was obviously done on purpose. And you don't get that kind of involvement where just like with the Kennedy assassination, you don't kill the president, the sitting president, unless the head of the Secret Service, the vice president, and the head of the FBI are all in on it. Well, with 9/11, it'd be the same thing. You couldn't get away with any of the stuff that happened unless people within the administration itself were in the know. I mean, it's kind of weird how they changed this rule. Rumsfeld just happens to not be where he's supposed to be on 9/11. And then right after 9/11, they went, oops, we're going to go back to that old rule because obviously we shouldn't have changed it. Our bad. I mean,
I've been
weird.
I've been hearing almost from day one that 9/11 was an inside job. And I got to tell you, Popeye, maybe it's just my old school thing, but I've never been convinced of that. Can you convince me it was an inside job?
I could convince you a multitude of ways. Just like with the Kennedy assassination, there's certain ways that you can look at these events. Instead of trying to look at the event as one big event, let's break it into 2 events. And you can do the same thing with the Kennedy assassination. You look at what led up to the event and the day of the event. And then separately, you look at the response. And a lot of times, almost every time, when you look at the response of the federal government to these official events, you can tell that there's a lot of weirdness going on just in the response. But if you want me to give you're a former police officer too, so you have a very investigative mind, Don, so you'll understand this. The essence of like a case would be if the guys that supposedly flew the planes into the buildings, if I could prove to you that they couldn't do the flying, then by definition, the government's official version of what happened would have to be incorrect, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the pilots, let's look at the simple thing. The guys that they say hijacked the airplanes, they only had training on small aircraft. The only thing that they'd ever flown, and they didn't fly them by themselves, they flew them with a trainer. And the training, the flight training, took, for the most part, took place down here in Florida. And or at least for a few of the trainees. And it was in Hollywood, Florida. And these guys hung out down in Hollywood, Florida during their quote unquote pilot training. It was very short. And the trainers that went up with them, and there's investigators. One of them recently just passed away. He was sick, and he ended up dying of cancer. But he was a great researcher, and he went down and he actually interviewed. He chased down right after 9/11. He went down to Florida, and Daniel Hopsinger, and he went down and he chased down the school, the pilot school that trained these guys, where they supposedly learned how to fly aircraft. And the pilots, the trainers at these school, not just pilots, but the trainers and the people that ran the school, said there's no way that these guys could have flown a commercial aircraft when they couldn't even fly a Cessna. And they didn't ever pass. They never finished their training. They only took a couple training flights. They didn't want to learn how to land. They only wanted to learn how to take off and fly. That was what they said. They never learned really any skills. And the guy who trained them, the trainers have said they would not fly in a plane with these guys. Like if they were the pilot and if they couldn't control the plane, they would never let these guys fly a plane. They were that bad. There's no way they could fly a Cessna, let alone a 737 or a 767. So you look at some of the things that the planes did supposedly, like Flight 77. The guy that flew that, Hani Hanyor, they say, and if you look at the flight track of the plane, it does this corkscrew turn over DC and then comes into the Pentagon. It actually kind of flies. They could have flown it straight down right into the top like a missile, but they didn't. They circled the Pentagon and chose to hit in the most reinforced section of the Pentagon. The only section of the Pentagon that had just undergone construction to reinforce it in case of a missile attack is just where the terrorists, I'm doing air quotes when I say that, just so happened to hit with the plane. And in that same section, on that morning, and I couldn't make this up, the day before 9/11, Rumsfeld came out and said that they were missing, I think it was like $2.3 billion that they could not account for in the Pentagon budget. They didn't know where it was, and he was looking into it. There was a whole press briefing about it. September 10th, 2001. You can look that up. That was the story. The morning of September 11th, he was meeting with the investigators in the Pentagon who had the evidence to show where all this money went. They had all of it. And he was like, well, I'm the Secretary of Defense. I'll meet with you. We'll meet. The office was in the Pentagon, and it just so happened to be in the same section of the Pentagon that got hit by Flight 77, supposedly. And all those investigators that had been researching that were killed, and their work was obviously destroyed in the ensuing fire. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But the pilot that supposedly pulled this off, he was one of the pilots that they asked this flight trainer about. And I have these videos. I could show you the interviews. I could send them to you if you want. That way you can watch them. But he asked, could Hani Hanyor have done this? No. He couldn't fly a Cessna. He could not barely keep the Cessna straight in the air without having problems. He was just an absolutely horrible pilot. And supposedly he takes this commercial jet and does this absolute loop-de-loop that fighter pilots and commercial pilots today say they couldn't do. and can't
Well,
be
let me
done.
ask you the obvious question. Who the hell flew it?
Well, what if I told you
It
it'd be
was a
one of two
missile.
things. Yes, I don't think Flight 77 hit the Pentagon because the only video evidence they've ever shown, because supposedly the cameras weren't working, that's another convenient thing. The ca- I mean, they have cameras on satellites that can see the tag in your underwear from outer space, but none of the cameras around the Pentagon were working that day, and the only thing they've ever released is this smoke trail. It's like 2 shots, and in one of them, you
Well,
see a
what the
smoke
hell
trail.
happened to Flight 77 if you're correct?
They probably would have landed it at, an airport, like, probably an Air Force base somewhere. They would have disabled the passengers some way, gas, however, and they could have just dispatched them. And then
Oh,
and the
Popeye,
wait
that's
hold
for me,
on,
it's
I
a
wait.
bridge too far.
But okay, it sounds like a bridge too far. But what if I told you there was plans on the books that mimic this very thing happening? And it goes back to, again, President Kennedy. They had you ever hear of Operation Northwoods
Yes.
and the Northwoods documents? Okay, they were going to run around and stage terror attacks in Miami. They were going to have CIA trained Cubans, some of the same Cuban dissidents that were pissed off that at Kennedy, and that were used in to facilitate his assassination because that was such a big event. They actually called it the big event. That was the nickname for it. Um, but they planned on doing fake terror bombings all around Miami, and at the time, the University of Miami was the second largest CIA substation in the entire country. They were running all this anti-Castro ops. They were running out of the University of Miami. And so the CIA was going to fake these terror attacks so that they could blame it on Cuba as a justification for us to invade and nuke Cuba. Sound familiar to what we were talking about before, right? Well, Kennedy got wind of this, and the guy that came up with it, his name was Lyman Lemonster, and he was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. And they decided to you can't, with a guy that was that high, you can't really do much with him. So they promoted him on upwards, and Kennedy ended up calling Curtis LeMay back into duty. Good old bombs away LeMay from World War II. They bring him back, and LeMay wanted to nuke Cuba. He literally wanted to drop a nuke on Cuba, and Kennedy was like, "Wow, I went from the frying pan into the fire with this one." So he wouldn't let them do any of that, but they wanted to do that. And in this Northwoods document, you also see that their plan was to hijack an airliner and land it at an Air Force base, disable and dispatch the passengers. At the same Air Force base, they would have a drone, remotely flown plane, and they had the technology to do this back then because all the airplane manufacturers, Boeing and all them, since the 60s, they've been able to remotely crash aircraft. That's how they came up with safer jet fuel and safer runways. They flew. There's like famous video footage where you'll see a Boeing, and I think it was a 747 they used, or it might have been it wasn't a 747. It was one of the earlier versions of their planes. Anyway, they had it. They took it up, they did a couple loops with it, and then they came in and they purposely crashed the plane into the runway. Well, they couldn't do that with a pilot or a co-pilot. They would have been dead. So it was remotely flown, and that was in the 60s. So the technology did exist. And the idea in the Northwoods, it says this in their own documents. It's all declassified. They were going to take this drone plane, painted to look like a passenger plane. They were going to put dummies in it, or if you've ever seen the movie The Long Kiss Goodnight, came out in the late 90s, they do the same thing. They stage a terror attack and they take a body out of a freezer and put it in the cab of a truck that they're going to blow up. They can do the same thing, but the idea was to put either mannequins or dead bodies into the seats, remotely fly the plane out over the Florida Straits in between Cuba and Florida, and remotely detonate an explosive device on board, blowing up the plane, sending it to the bottom of the ocean, where at the time the technology didn't exist to do recovery in in the water like that, where it's, you have to deal with weather and sharks and depth. So the technology didn't exist. So it just would have sunk to the bottom of the ocean and it's gone. But they would have used that as a pretext to go and invade and nuke Cuba. It's in their own documents. So when you look and read at the Northwoods documents and you go, huh, they were going to actually remotely fly an airplane and blow it up in the 60s. It's not really too far to believe that they could have remotely flown an aircraft into the two twin towers. Now, the technology
Now,
since then,
let me caution you. We are literally at the break time.
okay,
Hold that thought, okay? And we'll take our break and we'll pick up when we get back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dark Matters Radio tonight. My guest, Popeye from Down the Rabbit Hole, heard right here on KGRA. Oh, Gary's back.
Oh, I never left. I've been here.
He must have had a bathroom break or something. Was that it, Gary?
No, I've
Anyway,
been here the whole time. I'm just listening.
we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, so stick around. And we are back. Oh, great. Gary's still there. I was getting nervous, buddy. Getting nervous, Look at that look.
I've been keeping up on our little chat over here. At one point, Andy Morrow said, I got no armed dart in me. I listened to what Popeye and Kristen reported. Also, Andy Morrow says, One-Eyed McCain was a rhino, which I never liked McCain. In fact, the only time I ever registered as a Republican was when I was living in Arizona so I could vote against him in the primaries. Only time. Putin, and then he says Putin would nuke Britain before anything. Any thoughts on that?
Me?
Yeah, you or Popeye, because that's what Andy Morrow just said.
I kind of doubt that. The Brits, okay, the British are how do I say this politely? Oh, screw politely.
They're barely human.
The Brits have been neutered. Okay. They're
neutered.
Yeah,
that country is in bad shape, almost as bad as Canada, if not worse.
The BBC, my God, they make CNN and MSNBC look Republican, for God's sake. They're so far left. And they have so many activist Muslims that have moved into Great Britain. Right now, I don't know if you saw this article. The British are basically putting up a monument to honor British Muslim soldiers from the First World War, a century later, okay, but they have been pushed into basically honoring to placate, I guess, the current Muslim population in Great Britain, and they have a lot of them from, among other places, Sri Lanka, Pakistan especially. So they basically, I don't know. It's not the same Britain that was there 80 years ago by any stretch.
Yeah, it's not the same Britain it was when I was over there. It's completely different now, overrun. Those that are, I'm hoping it's not too late for them. But finally, certain groups are starting to push back. But I'm like, you had your chance.
They were always. I was over in Britain in 93 and 97. Vicky and I had been invited over there to give talks at their big Bufora symposium. And I was always getting crap, in a good-natured way. I mean, this was not a malicious thing, but getting crap about we Americans and our quote-unquote gun culture and shootings and so forth. Well, the Brits took care of that. They disarmed everybody. But what they forgot to do was take away everybody's knives. And people are getting knifed there left and right. So,
And
There
yet
you
they don't
go.
blame the knives.
No. That's funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. It makes so much sense. But
They
Anima
actually
also,
do. A friend of mine who he was a former, he used to be a huge streamer and radio show host. He passed away about a year and a half ago. The late great Kev Baker, R.I.P. buddy, love you, miss you. He reported. I used to joke with him, and we used to say, "Oh, they're going to ban knives next over there." And this was like, 10, 12 years ago. And he's like, "Oh, Popeye," in his heavy Scottish accent. He'd be like, you watch, they'll do it. They're literally, now they're trying to stop people. And I think they might have actually done it. They might have passed the legislation. You can't go, how like you can go to Walmart and buy a set of steak knives? You can't do that
Yeah.
anymore because they've had so many stabbings. Well, so then that means that controlling weapons doesn't really work, does it? Because you took away the guns and people just stabbed each other. Wow, imagine that. Murder's illegal, and yet people still do it. I mean, you'd think that making a law against something, Don, would just automatically stop people from doing things.
Look, the bottom line is they refuse to look at the infection. They look at the symptoms, but not the infection. The infection is, hey, believe it or not, and believe me, I can tell you I experienced it. There are bad people out there, and bad people will do bad things to good people. So, what do you do? What is the solution? Well, you arrest them, you take them to court. If they're convicted, you pop them into the slammer and they stay there for a while. But what happened in America? What's happened in LA? What's happened in Chicago? What's happened in San Francisco? What's happened in New York City? What's happened in Trenton? They get these George Soros inspired district attorneys. They do away with bail. Okay. Somebody gets arrested, and New York City was famous for this. They bring him in, they book him, take him for a bail hearing. The judge says, turn him loose, come back on this date for your court hearing. And what happens? Well, of course, most of them never show up. So, it's a farce. And people wonder why crime has surged out of reach in this country. Well, it's very simple. They're not making people accountable for their actions anymore. I guess that's politically incorrect. Well, screw that. Okay. It ain't working. And I got a feeling it's going to get worse before it ever gets better. So there you go. Have I said enough to get me canceled yet tonight? Popeye?
I'm gonna cancel you. I can't be your friend anymore, Don, because you
Oh, okay.
completely offended me with truth. I'd rather be plugged back into the Matrix and eat my steak. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just
Well,
simply say I would rather be plugged. That's right. I'll be here all week. Don't forget to tip your waiters.
Tip the waiter and waitress. Absolutely.
I
And
use
by
that
the way,
same
we
line
tell
when
you she misses you and to say hi to you.
Say
That was for
again.
you, Don. Anima said to say hi to you and tell you
Anima.
that she's in the
Hey,
chat.
Anima.
She
How you
said
doing, sweetie?
the whole thing about messing with Americans. She says that's just the European thing, giving Americans shit about their guns. But she's looking forward to going shooting with me.
All right.
Only because she trusts me, because I know how to
Okay.
handle them.
Okay. Well, that's good. Hey, I got to tell you, I've been, I've got some old series, and Popeye, this is directed at you. Some old TV series, and one of the best, and I love this thing. I've been watching it again in the last couple of weeks, off and on. Okay, not every night, but off and on. Space, Above and Beyond. And the other night, they had a. You guys are familiar with that MI5, MI6 operation during World War II to basically disinform the German general staff about the actual invasion coming to France, where they got a guy that I believe
Homeless
died
dude
of
that died.
pneumonia.
Yeah.
Died of pneumonia. Okay, they got him. They cleaned him up. They dressed him in an officer's uniform, phonied up a bunch of identification and all kinds of stuff. Very elaborate plot. They handcuffed a briefcase with supposedly top secret documents and had this guy pointed out as being one of the architects of the invasion, and then dumped his body off so it would flish in.
It was
Oh, what do we
Operation
got?
Mincemeat was what it was called.
Right. And the bottom line was the Germans fell for it. Well, on Space Above and Beyond, they basically had the same plot where a guy had been a convicted murderer that had been put to death. And they were going to basically run a disinformation campaign against the alien threat. And these aliens, their nickname is the Chigs. And they were going to dump. Are you familiar with that, Gary? Did you see it?
Oh yeah, I love that show. I mean, Arlie Ermy was on it, man.
Yes, yes. On the first or second episode is the training
He was the training.
Marine. Yeah, Sergeant Major. But anyway, that was a fascinating show, and it never got any traction. I don't understand why, but it should be. I think it should be remade because military sci-fi. There's something really going on there.
It was
Boy,
a great
we went
show.
from
I liked it.
nuclear war to space above and beyond. I guess you could only do that here, huh?
Hey, welcome to ADD Theater.
You guys know who Carol Rosen was?
Sure.
Yeah, she talked about von Braun, and her time with von Braun and what he
Let
told her,
me tell you.
and the
Let me tell you
weaponization
about
of
that.
space.
Let
Well,
me tell
think
you
about
about
it.
that.
What do we have now with Space Force? We had, and you just brought up a good point. You said we went from World War III to space. It just made me think of weaponizing everything in space.
I got no respect at all for Carol Rosen. Because number one, apparently she didn't do her homework. Werner von Braun was a goddamn SS colonel.
Yeah, he's a Nazi.
He used slave labor.
Yep.
God only knows how many Jews he killed.
Yep.
Okay. Building those rockets at Peenemünde.
Yep.
All right. We grabbed the son of a bitch in Operation Paperclip, bring him back. Rosen is Jewish. Now, first and foremost, that should have been at the top. If I were Jewish, I'm not, but if I were Jewish, I wouldn't spit on that guy. Okay? But he came over here. Oh, I just wanted to fly to the moon. I just wanted to build rockets. Well, you tell that to all the people in Great Britain that got blown up by his goddamn V2s. All right? That son of a bitch should have been tried as a war criminal and then hung with the rest of those Nazi bastards. But hey, that's
the question, Don, is
if they did
what
that,
do you
we
think of
wouldn't
his
have NASA.
rocketry?
Right. His rocketry was great, but that's why we stole him. That's why we wouldn't have NASA.
It is.
Honestly, we would not have NASA without Operation Paperclip. And what we did was we split them up, the scientists with the Russians. I know there's this big myth that there was the space race. I know that's what I was taught. Except when I started researching things as I got older, we were working with the Russians. Okay. They had part of the technology via the scientists, and we had part of it. And
We
You know,
nabbed the best first, though. I will tell you
we
that.
did. Well, we nabbed some people, but we traded with them too. There was a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
Why do they killed? All right, I'm gonna throw something else at you. You know, General Patton. You know, he didn't die in a
he
car
gave
accident,
warnings. Yeah, he was
correct?
murdered. He was
Yes,
assassinated.
he was assassinated, and a guy who was a former OSS operative named Douglas Bazanta came forward, and I interviewed the author who wrote the book. The book is called Target Patton, and the
There's no
guy who
object in
wrote it,
the vehicle that could have caused the injury.
right? No, he Bazanta explained how he did it, and they broke the window, and they rigged it so the window was broken in Patton's car, and it was stuck like down just enough for Bazanta to shoot through, and he shot a projectile that it wasn't meant to penetrate and create like a bullet wound, but it was meant to,
To
you
break
know,
his neck.
break his neck, and it didn't kill him. He ended up having a broken neck, and then later in the hospital
Pneumonia.
he was doing good, and he was ready to come home, and like the night before he was due to come home, he suddenly dies in the hospital, and it's so tragic. They didn't want Patton going home because he was independently wealthy. He was going to resign his military commission so that way they could not control what he said. And he was going to run for Senate, and he would have won because he was wildly popular, and he knew, where the proverbial bodies were buried, so to speak,
He
and they
also
couldn't.
had a hatred for, the Soviets.
Yes. Oh, he got into it with it was like right at the end of the war. He got into it with a Soviet general at like some gala. He, got into basically told him, I'll gladly fight you. We'll bomb, basically we'll come kick your ass is basically what he said to this general. Caused a huge uproar. He got in big trouble for it. He didn't care. Patton said, our enemies, we shouldn't stop now. We should be fighting the Soviets. Like they're weakened. They're using ox carts. They had to use a lot of our stuff. We were giving the Soviets American-made equipment to use because
Yep.
they didn't have any of their own. We had our troops getting involved in firefights with the Russians at the end of
Well,
World War II.
here's the dirty secret about the Russians. Joseph Stalin, killed more innocents than
He killed more
Adolf
Jews
Hitler
than
dreamed
Adolf
of.
Hitler. Yep.
Yep, he
Okay,
did.
In
and that
fact,
was
Hitler, they got the idea of the trains, Don, you remember that, from Stalin. Yeah, oh yeah,
Stalin in the 1920s went into the Ukraine. Now, this is something everybody's surprised. Why are the Ukrainians and the Russians killing each other? Okay, well, the Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union for what was it, 75, 80 years?
something like that, yeah.
Stalin had gone in there, completely denuded their agricultural output, stole it, took it back to Russia, and the Ukrainians had a famine where over 20 million died of starvation. Deliberate act. 20 million Ukrainians died of starvation because the Russians stole all their foodstuffs. Well, I can imagine, even if it was a century ago, if I were a Ukrainian, I probably would still be pretty pissed about that. I don't know about you guys, but
Well, you definitely wouldn't trust them. The term white Russian, like the drink, it refers to like intellectuals in Russian society at that time, in Soviet society. And Stalin purged all of them. They literally, the end of World War II, by the end of the Second World War, they had no intellectuals left because not only were, people getting killed, obviously fighting in World War II, but the intellectuals were getting wiped out by Stalin himself because he was so paranoid. Every day he would wake up and he would write out a list of people that needed to be murdered. It's like it's a running kind of a gag almost now. Like, historians kind of almost seem to like make fun of it a little bit, but there's pictures where you'll see Stalin standing next to three guys, and then it's the same picture, and there's only two guys next to him. Then there's one. He actually had that done.
I've
He
seen
would
that,
have
yep.
people murdered, and then they would just be airbrushed out of every photo they were ever in, like they never existed. He literally did that to his own people. He did it to his own officers. He did it. The white Russians, all the intellectuals, the doctors, the free thinkers, the professors, anybody that used their brain power, they were purged. And then, they went and at the end of World War II, they were dismantling German factories and stuff. They were bringing all these factories back to Russia to put them back together to make up for what had been destroyed in Russia and during World War II. And you know what? They didn't have anybody they didn't even know how to put the stuff back together, because that's why there was a lot of Germans they ended up taking back to Russia with them, because they had no idea how to operate anything, because all the intellectuals had been murdered. They literally got rid of any of the intelligentsia. They had to get rid of
Well,
them because you can't have free thinkers.
That's how Finland, little Finland, ended up kicking the Soviet ass when they invaded Finland in 39-40 during the Winter War, because Stalin had purged all his senior military leadership. Okay? The Red Army had fallen apart. And the only ones that survived were the ass kissers. All right?
Yep.
Stalin's ass kissers. They ended up staying. But they were political officers as opposed to military officers, tactics, strategy. I mean, you name it. They didn't have it. And Finland whipped them bloody. Well,
and by the way, there's a conversation going on in the chat right now. Let's see. She said Austria didn't even let Hitler get into art school, which led to a lot of his hatred. And then she said, and then I replied, some idiot historians teach that Hitler considered Mussolini a stooge, when it was complete opposite, because he borrowed from Mussolini. He was inspired by Mussolini and some of the things that Stalin did. And he took a lot of their ideas. And that's what you saw happening in Germany. And then she said, well, Germany was the problem. I said, the problem is Britain and France and the Treaty of Versailles. I said, if the U.S. had enforced a better treaty instead of chickening out like he did, World War II might not have ever come around.
well,
France
it was bound to come.
And Britain. It was. I don't think it would have been in a different form.
It was bound to come because World War II, World War I and World War II were not about what we think they were. Our guys, our people were involved.
Killing of Archduke Ferdinand?
Yeah, it was about setting up. So World War I was meant to set up the League of Nations. They failed. So World War II happened, and what came about after World War II? The United Nations. So if the globalist, you hear the term globalism used a lot now, and they try to muddy that down and say, oh, you're attacking Israel or Jewish people. No. Globalists they actually used to call themselves globalists, and they used to tout globalism back in mid 2000s. And now they'll call it other things. They try to get away from it because the term globalism got a bad moniker. But globalism it's the New World Order agenda. That same New World Order George H.W. Bush talked about in 92. The same New World Order agenda that goes back again to Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati, going back to 1776. Okay. Even George Washington in his diaries, you can go to the Library of Congress, and he writes about Washington. Our first president wrote about the Illuminati, and he called them the Jacobins or the Jacobites. And there's, to this day, the socialists have the pretend socialists, the Illuminists have a magazine that they put out called Jacobin Magazine. And they say it's a Marxist, communist magazine. It's Illuminism. It's the same garbage. It's same people that Washington was warning about back in his diaries. So, and he wrote about there was a money power. The Jacobites, the Illuminists, were in New York City, and they were trying to already overthrow this very new fledgling baby government and country that had been created after, the Revolutionary War. So this has been going on since the very revolution, like since the revolution itself. This fight with these same people has been going on. uh that whole duel between Hamilton and Burr. Hamilton was an agent of the Rothschilds. And look, I'm a retired
Yeah,
Coast
I've
Guard
always
man,
been on
right?
Burr's
And
side, to tell you the
right?
truth.
Well, no, seriously. And as a retired Coastie, Hamilton founded the United States Coast Guard. It was called the Revenue Cutter Service, right? He founded that. And we're taught, how great of a guy Hamilton was. No, he was a Rothschild agent.
No,
That's
he's
what
a
the Revenue
terrible
Cutter
person.
Service was. Revenue Cutter Service. What the Coast Guard was, what do you think the country, I mean, we were the country's first Navy after the Revolution, and what did they use us for? Tax enforcement.
Well, Hamilton was a very strong Federalist.
Yep.
Okay.
And
He
yep, controlled
he
by the
wanted
bankers.
he wanted absolute control by the federal government.
Yuppers.
And this nation was basically developed for states. Okay. The only time the feds were ever supposed to come into play is if it was something like an invasion or a national emergency. Otherwise, they're supposed to stay the hell out and keep their mouth shut. Well, look what happened. Now, the First Amendment is at total risk. Okay. The thing that made America America, the Second Amendment, they're doing everything they can do to disembowel that. And what happens if they do? Suddenly you have a disarmed populace, okay, and it's not going to be a good thing, especially in light of the crime and the criminals running rampant through the streets today.
Well, you have to wonder, why does the government want to disarm the populace so bad? I mean, gee, we're the only country where it's ingrained in our founding documents that everybody gets a gun and that we're equal on a firepower level with the government. And when people go, if that's the case, then that would mean that we should be able to own tanks. Well, actually, in the Revolutionary War, the government had to go to privateers who had their own ships with cannons and stuff on board and said, hey, can you guys come fight for us? We need your weapons. So yes, in the time when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they came up with the Second Amendment, people did own the modern equivalent, or the then equivalent of a tank, or they had cannons. So no, there wasn't a question. The whole point is that if the general populace, everybody's, oh, it's about self-defense. That's the bullshit argument. The whole argument is this: if the whole point was the government and the populace are equal. That way, the government can never get tyrannical power because the people will always be able to keep them in check. That's what the Second Amendment is about. No, a lot of gun people don't want to talk about that because they're scared to say it. They're afraid of getting in trouble for trying to foment revolution. But that's what the Second Amendment was about. They didn't care about hunting.
The
If you
left
didn't
is
hunt in
after people like that, though,
1776,
Popeye.
well, right. But if you didn't hunt in 1776, you starved to death. So hunting wasn't, they weren't codifying your right to go hunt and shoot a deer. It would say that pretty clearly. It would say the Second Amendment is about arming people to go hunt. Period. It does not say that at all. It's about keeping tyrannical power from coming to be. And that's these guys. I mean, some of them, yes, they were in secret societies, all this stuff. But look, they came from a time where they were trying to get away. The idea, at least, of founding this country was to get away from the system that they had been oppressed by. And it wasn't even taxes. The biggest thing that the revolution came about was because, again, going back to the bankers, because the Bank of Britain, they were lending money to the colonists at the time, and the colonists were then paying interest on this. So it was too much. They understood that, hey, we're going to constantly be in debt. We're going to be crushed by this. How about we make our own money and just trade amongst our own colonies, which they all did. And that was a big no-no to the British and the bankers. They didn't want that. That's why and the same thing with Lincoln. He had greenbacks. You know, Kennedy, same thing.
Mhm.
He had the Kennedy greenbacks. He said, you know what, we're going to go back, we're going to start using silver in issuing money backed by silver. That's what the quote unquote Kennedy
Yeah, because
greenbacks
precious
were.
metals are the only thing that have real value.
Yes. Because it's the paper, the dollar bill is just legal tender. It used to say this is backed by gold. Now it says this is legal tender, which means it's just a piece of paper. And they say it has a $20 worth of value. And we all agree and go along with that it's got $20 because it clearly is printed on that piece of paper. But that's not how it was supposed to work. Kennedy understood this. And that's another reason they blew his head off. Lincoln understood this. That's why his head got blown off. Okay. And I mean, I'm not trying to sanctify Lincoln either. He did things I didn't agree with, but again, he went against the money changers, boom, got his head blown off. It's the banks. They're the only ones that benefit from wars and all of this because everybody has to go to them to borrow money. That's no matter what side you're on, you got to borrow money to finance your soldiers and your tanks and your airplanes. That doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, when the Federal Reserve, when their money printer goes burr, we're borrowing that money from them at interest. The idea of the Federal Reserve was pretty much why we founded or why we fought the revolution, to not have that type of control over our monetary supply. And yet,
Well, it wasn't only
boom.
the monetary supply. Okay.
Well,
We were
there's
being,
numerous things, but that was a big factor.
well, sure it was, but we were being ordered by Parliament to do this, do that, and they refused to allow American representatives into Parliament to represent American interests.
Yep, no
Okay.
taxation without representation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
No, that was a big thing too. Well, again, that goes back to taxes. I have tattooed on my left hand, right? It goes down from my wrist across my hand and all the way down to the tip of my thumb, and it says in nice script, it says taxation is theft, and I wholeheartedly believe it because I don't have a problem if the government was being run the way it's supposed to, and we were taxed a little bit in order to everybody paid a little bit to go and fund that. But that's not what happens. The money that people are taxed doesn't even cover the principal. It goes towards the interest payment on all of this money on the national debt. We're not even paying the principal off, Don. It's insane. It's
Oh,
just absolutely
I
insane.
know. Look, let's go a little closer to home. Nobody ever called me up or sent me a letter or stopped by the house to ask for my thoughts on whether we should be giving untold billions and billions and billions of dollars to the Ukraine. Congress didn't authorize it for the most part. Okay? It was arbitrarily done.
Yep.
They practically denuded the United States Armed Forces. Right now, guess what we're really, really short of?
Let me guess.
Artillery
Missiles.
rounds.
Yeah, missiles, bombs, rockets, artillery rounds, and bullets.
We gave all that to the Ukrainians. And, I got to tell you, you talk about a bunch of corrupt sons of bitches. Well, of course they both are. The Russians, the Ukrainians, but that's an ongoing criminal enterprise. Do we all remember what happened at the very beginning of the Biden administration? Hunter Biden sitting on the board of, what was it, Burisma?
Yeah, Burisma.
Burisma, yeah. Okay, getting millions and millions for what? Access to his old man.
Don't forget, he's a budding artist, Don, whose work is up in galleries next to people who have been like famous artists for 20, 30 years. And his stuff is selling for $500,000 a piece. No, there's no money laundering going on there.
No, not any. No.
None.
And this is the kind of crap that'll get you banned from YouTube. Okay,
Yep.
Talking about.
Thank God we're on Rumble.
Yes. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. You can say that again. Say it again.
Thank God we're on Rumble.
And God bless Sam and Dean Winchester. You bet.
Hells to the yeah. Fighting demons. I think some of them might be my exes.
Yeah. Would be
Yeah,
a show without Gary.
it's kind of crazy. I know all this stuff sounds crazy. I know I kind of melted your brains a little bit in the first hour. I kind of felt bad. I have that effect on people where my brain has all this stuff stored in it, and I can just, because I've been researching it for like 20 years, so my brain can just go.
You see, and I brought you on here so you could spew, Popeye.
Well, I appreciate that, Don. I am honored to be on with you guys. I do appreciate it. You guys have a great broadcast, and it's always good to hang out with veterans because we all have we just have this different take. We have like a sick, dark sense of humor. We all get each other.
That's true. When I first met Popeye and Commander Cobra was on the show. Now, Cobra was Air Force and a Coastie, and then Popeye came on. He was a Coastie. So I was feeling a little ornery.
Like West Coastie? Is that what you mean?
A Coastie.
No, Coastie is short for Coast Guardsman. They call us Coastie short, yeah.
Yes, the almost Navy.
Yes,
you're stepping on me, you son of a bitch. I said to Popeye, well, is it true that the Coast Guard is like the bastard redheaded stepson of the Navy? And I was going to say, I'm asking for a friend. I never managed to get that out because Cobra jumped in there all over me. I was kidding, right? Right, Popeye?
Of course. Of course I know you're kidding. They call us puddle pirates or the Brownwater Navy. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, a lot of you boys showed up in Vietnam.
Not to mention World War II.
Yep, we drove the U-boats.
The Marines, you dropped Marines off. They needed that cover you guys gave them.
Yep, actually, Douglas Monroe, the only Coast Guardman to ever have been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously, led his entire boat crew.
He put himself in the way of the fire. Yeah,
he put he put himself in between almost I can't remember how many Japanese troops, but it was at least 200-300 Japanese troops. They were evacuating Marines off the island, and they were trying to get the Marines off, and the Marines were going to get slaughtered. And Monroe saw what was going to happen, and he rounded up as many coasties as he could, and they took their boats, and they put their boats in between the Japanese and the Marines and opened fire on the Japs to draw their attention and draw their fire. And they were out in the open. They had no cover. They knew it was a suicide mission, and they did it anyway to save Marines because
even when it's a suicide mission, by the way, you still have that glint of hope. Maybe I won't die.
Yeah, no, you're like, God, I hope I come out the other side of this.
Yeah.
But and a lot of them were cut down and killed. And Monroe was the one who spearheaded the charge and led the attack. And they were responsible for all those Marines getting off the beach and getting to safety. And they took out a ton of Japanese. They a lot of them got killed, but they took a lot of those Japanese soldiers with them. So
was that at Guadalcanal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Yep. And I got to tell you, I have friends that were in the Coast Guard, and as much as I tease them, I don't tease them I tease them less than I tease the Air Force. But the Coast Guard, people I've known in the Coast Guard were in more firefights than some of the Army guys I know.
Yep. They just don't call it. They call us they call what we do policing action. They don't call it combat because it's not quote unquote in theater. So when you're getting shot at by drug runners, we don't get combat pay. We get hazardous duty pay, but they don't, they won't give you, they literally don't give you combat pay, and they don't consider it combat.
Well, so that's why God made the M-Deuce.
Yes. That's one of our favorites, Don. We had one on each bridge wing. We had a We had a
That's
21 mic
that's a
on
sweet
the
one.
yeah, and we had a Bofors cannon on the front. We used to that thing was fun too, but the 50 calibers were that was our when the small boat crews would go out to do a boarding, we would we were on a 200 I was on a 210-foot long cutter, and we'd sit back a little bit and they'd aim the front cannon at the boat at whatever we were going to board, and the 50 cals on the bridge wings would be aimed. So like the boat crew going to do the boarding team didn't really have any worries, because if somebody on that ship that they were going on to opened fire on them, it was going to be a really crappy day for them. It was
Yeah,
not going to end well.
a bad weekend.
Yeah. And we did get to exercise, like we'd come upon like abandoned yachts. You'd be surprised how many millionaires like abandon their yachts for insurance fraud out in the middle of the Caribbean. And you come
Wow.
upon this, they consider it a hazard to navigation. And that's we like to hear that, because that translates to we get to pour gasoline in the boat,
Yeah, well,
throw
yeah, because
flares
they
into
can
it.
drift into dangerous areas and cause accidents.
Yes. So we set them on fire and then shoot them. We use them for target practice. They're like, oh, that's
Yay.
when they're like, oh, well, we need the fire teams need the practice. Let's go. So when we find an abandoned boat, everyone's excited because we all know what we get to do.
Do you know who Brian Boland is, Popeye?
The name sounds familiar.
He's a former commander in the Coast Guard. He's written quite a few books. I've done all the book covers for him. And
Oh,
Dale and
interesting.
Julia just commissioned me to do a new book that he's got coming out. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name, but I'm looking forward to this being the best one I do yet. One of my favorite covers I did has a Coast Guard airplane. I think it's a C-47, and a Coast Guard cutter approaching a ship and a drug boat on fire. And it's a really intense one. Look up Brian Boland books, and you'll probably find my book cover.
Cool. Are they like
It's
fictionalized, or are they like, does he tell like
They're
historical stories
fictional
about
accounts
stuff?
based on real situations.
Cool. No, I like that. That's cool. Somebody's like giving the Coast Guard some cred, some stories. I like
Much
that.
so. Yep.
Yeah, we are kind of like the
This will be my
Don
3rd
jokes.
book for him.
That's awesome. But I'm gonna have to look him up and check his books out. Like
Brian
Don said
Boland.
earlier, what's Brian Boland?
Boland.
Boland?
And it's spelled the traditional way, the first name Brian, and the last name is Boland. Very
Oh,
good
cool.
writer, by the way.
It's just I would assume I could find the books on Amazon.
You can definitely find them on Amazon.
Cool. I'll check it out. I'll probably find them super interesting because I'm a book nerd as it is, and then being a ghosty. But no, you
Is
hit
that
the nail on-
Teddy? Is that Teddy?
Yes, that's Smarter Ted.
Teddy.
I was messing with Chris because he had Ted, and he just wrote Ted on his, and he had it as his avatar, and then I popped mine on. It says Smarter Ted. I like messing with Chris.
That's funny.
So, well, by the way, this morning, something we were talking about, we went off on an ADD tangent because Hitler got brought up again, and I brought up the series I thought was amazingly good. Could be taken as conspiratorial, but at the end of the series, the information that they had was turned over to the FBI and CIA. That Hitler, there's no proof he died.
Oh, Hunting
Zero
Hitler.
proof. Yeah, I love that series.
Yeah, no, dude, he went to South America, down by
Absolutely. He
Venezuela.
was flown out. They took the lights down on that Major Strasse out in front of the bunker. All of a sudden, one day, all the lights were down right before this suicide, right? All of a sudden, all the lights are down because they needed the extra width for a plane to come in and land in front of the bunker and then take off. And they flew him down to Spain, who was very friendly to Nazis.
Yep.
And they got him out on a sub from there. We know that some shit was going down because heavy water that was being kept up north was now gone.
Yeah,
And
they
that shit was
smuggle
down there in Argentina.
So this will blow your mind too. You guys know who Jim Mars is, obviously, right?
Right.
Okay.
A friend of mine.
Yep, Jim was a great guy. He was a friend of mine too. Just absolutely, that guy's like a national treasure. Um, in his book, Rise of the Fourth Reich, he explains and he gives the evidence. And I talked to Jim about this. I had him on the show a couple times, and I talked to him about this on air, off air, and then I also chased down because he was great. Like if he said something, he always had, you know, evidence to back it up. There were sources that you could go to research his stuff, and I, I like that when authors do that. So I researched this, but they snuck the heavy water in gold lined casks over to the United States. That's people don't realize this. So, like at the Trinity test, and I know I've talked about this before, and modern history would tell you this is not true. But when they, Oppenheimer, when they did the Trinity test, and this is Jim's research brought this up to me, and I was like, "What?" And when I dived down this rabbit hole, it blew my mind. But they used the material, the, the material that they had created and made. They used it at the Trinity test site, so they didn't have enough for another 2 bombs. Where did they get the material for the 2 bombs? Well, it came from Germany because Germany was working on a bomb. So we didn't just take their scientists, we also took their nuke technology too. They were working on a bomb at the end of World War II. We just happened to get ours, off the ground, so to speak, and dropped and before they ever got theirs. And that was because they ended up, the Nazi party ended up falling, and everything fell apart for them before they could actually have it functional. But it was, Jim talks about it, and the same guy that wrote Target Patent wrote another book about Japan called Japan's Secret War. And I just can't remember the author's name, but you can look up the 2 titles. And I've had him on multiple times. Japan was also working on the nuclear bomb at the end of
Right.
World War II. They had actually tested it on what is today the North Korean peninsula. The
Right.
Germans had tested their weapon on the Russians on the Russian front. They wiped out an entire battalion. There's another guy that wrote a couple books. I can't remember his name either right now. It's my car accident brain. One of the books is titled SS Brotherhood of the Bell, and Joseph Farrell, that's his name, Professor Joseph
Joe
Farrell.
Farrell.
Yep,
Yeah.
another smart, great guy. And if you read his books, he shows you like the government documents and stuff that he's been able to unearth from them talking in uh, you know when they got back all these guys through paperclip and Nazi officers and stuff. They would sit down and debrief them, and a lot of this stuff Farrell's got in his books. And they openly talked about how, yes, the Nazi scientists, the SS scientists, because that's where the SS controlled all of the secret weapons and all the secret technology. And in his stuff, he talks about how, especially SS Brotherhood of the Bell, in the book, he talks about how the SS got their information on how to make the material for an atomic weapon, right? And they were getting this information, like the Nazi Bell, from an otherworldly or other dimensional source, and they were using occult type methods to speak to this other dimensional source. And supposedly, the bomb that they were making was supposed to be a detonation device for something much larger. Now that's a thought. I mean, think about what we know, like with Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and imagine if that was supposed to be just a detonation device. So, like,
Well, that was the secret about the hydrogen bomb. Okay. Back in the early days, I don't know, I have no idea about today, but it took an atomic bomb to detonate the hydrogen bomb. You'd have to talk to Ed Teller about that, but
yes,
yeah,
and well, that was the basic idea too. And some of the idea for the hydrogen bomb that we tested, that again came from these Nazi scientists, because that's why we took all their scientists, because the Nazis weren't that far off. They were just doing different techniques. They had a problem with the guidance system for the bomb. Jim Marrs talked about it, and again, Rise of the Fourth Reich. So it's not just Jim's book that says it. Like I said, I named 3 different authors, and all of these 3 different authors separately in their own research, and I've talked to all 3 of them separately, not having them all on at the same time, separate streams of consciousness and conversations with these gentlemen, and all these pieces, Don, it goes together like a puzzle, and it shows you a different picture of history than what most people know.
Well, Popeye, I think you'll be the first guy to agree with me, but we have been living for decades within the mushroom syndrome. They keep us in the dark and they feed us copious amounts of bullshit. That's the mushroom syndrome.
I like that.
And
Yes, I agree.
If they feed it to us long enough and continuously, people start to believe it, and that's terrifying.
It's the whole theory of becoming a connoisseur of what's good bullshit and what's bad bullshit. If you eat enough bullshit, you eventually become a connoisseur of bullshit.
Are you eating dinner? Is that why you keep blanking out?
Yeah, I don't want to eat on camera, and it's not part of the show.
Oh, and I'm sitting here starving.
Starving Marvin. I'm so hungry. Oh, we got 5 minutes to wrap.
Is that per our 5-star producer?
Yes, Chanel.
Yeah, I had my little clock up, making sure I don't run over time. I don't want to get on Chanel's bad side. They got another show right after us. Well, Popeye, we're down to the last few minutes. What are your thoughts of wisdom, my friend? Do you want to give out to the audience?
The reason they lie to you so much and the reason they baffle you with bullshit the way they do is because they fear you. They're afraid of you and your power. So they have to lie to you and convince you have no power and that you're powerless without them. When in reality, you have the power that they claim to have. And they have to position themselves, they have to put themselves into positions of authority and then make themselves sound like they're an authority. But they do all of this and lie to you and, try to, like I said, baffle everybody with bullshit because they fear you and your true power. And
well, here's a question. Here's a question for you. And as a matter of fact, it's for the entire audience. Why is it that if for whatever reason, okay, you are being questioned by federal authorities, and if you lie to them, that's a felony offense. But they lie to you every day and nothing happens. Do you have any explanation for that?
It's called rules for thee and not for me.
Ah, okay. Well, you cleared it up.
Yep. They don't follow their own rules. They never intend to. The rules are meant for us. They look and they being the people that control the system, they think of us like cattle. And now the people that they have that are useful idiots that run the system for them, they think that they're part of this like inner group. They're convinced that they're part of this elitist group. The elites don't think that either. Okay. And just like the Bolsheviks did, and just like Yuri Bezmenov warned, that once the useful idiots have outlived their usefulness, they'll be lined up against the wall and shot. And that's what's happened throughout history. And it will just keep repeating.
Okay, now you've been out of action for a couple of months because of some medical problems. You're back now. What's on your upcoming show this coming Saturday?
Actually, I'm going back in time, and I'm going back to 1984, and I'm bringing back to the airwaves a KGB subversive, Yuri Bezmenov, to talk about and it's the full length interview that he did with G. Edward Griffin, where he explains what ideological subversion is and how it's being used against the United States. And this was 40 years ago. And when you watch this video and you take into account what he's saying, your brain is automatically going to go, wow, that makes sense now why all this crazy stuff is happening today. Why all the craziness, why they're trying to destroy everything at a base level and just make everybody feel isolated and alone, because ordo ab chaos. The Illuminati's motto is order from chaos. They have an agenda. It is a new world order. They have to get everybody to beg for it. So they create problem, reaction, solution. And that's what pushing everybody to their limits is, because eventually people are just going to be like, all right, enough. Somebody come in and save us. And they'll have their plan. They'll pull it out of the drawer, slap it on the table. That's what I mean by everybody has the power within them. Go out and the final message I could leave you with is, I have it tattooed on the side of my neck. It says, be the change. It means go out and be the change that this world needs. Go out and be the positive light. That will change the world for the better. You be a positive light.
We have reached the witching hour. Now, I just have one thing to say before we break and go away for this week. I was tempted in 1970 or 71 to get a tattoo, but I knew when I got home, my mother would have beat the shit out of me, so I didn't. So there's that. And that's it, gang. That's it for this week. Hey, keep those eyes pointed up. We'll be back next week. Don't forget, Thursday, UAP Crossfire, starting at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 on the East Coast. Have a great week, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.